Hi, it's Jeff from Cycling Elements. Today we're going to learn how to change an inner tube. We'll get right at it. You have your flat tire, so we need to change the inner tube. We will start by removing the valve cap. Some valves will have a lock ring on it. We will remove that as well. Next, we will need to pinch the tire off the rim to separate it even before we put our tire lever in, okay? So we'll work around with our thumbs and we will pinch the tire off the rim, getting it all loose and movable. Then we will get our tire lever, and I'm going to work opposite of the valve. I'm going to peel away, get my tire lever in there, getting a chunk of tire. And then from here, I'm going to push forward or pull backwards to separate the tire from the rim. I'm going to push. There we go. Separate the tire from the rim. You now have access to the inner tube. I'm going to start with the valve. I'll push the valve up, pull the inner tube out, and there's my flat inner tube. I'm going to set that aside because I am going to have a look to see why that went flat. We're going to go a step further. I'm going to take the tire off as well because we really want to make sure we figured out why this went flat so it doesn't happen again. It's really frustrating to go through all this work only to put it back together and have it be wrong again. So, tire is loose and separated from the rim. I'm going to pull the tire up, the rim down, and then pull the two apart. And now we have all our separate pieces. We have the inner tube, which holds the air, in this case is flat. We have your tire, which is the tread, and then we have the wheel that it all goes on. Now we're going to inspect to figure this out. When you were riding, if it was something obvious like you hit a pothole, you hit a curb, a root or a rock on the trail, and it instantly went flat, you can pretty much be assured it was a pinch flat. So much impact, and you pinched the inner tube between the ground and your rim. If you're riding and you have no idea when it went flat, that's where it's really important to check everything to find why it went flat. First place I always start is the tire. I am going to visually inspect the outside, both the side of the tire as well as the tread, and I'm going to sweep with my fingers on the inside. And you're looking all the way around and feeling for the slightest little pricker on the inside and looking for any cuts and rips on the outside. You would be surprised with how small a thorn or a glass or a piece of metal can actually puncture a tube. So be careful, but have a sweep through to make sure you find if there was some debris or a rip with the tire. The other area we need to look at is the rim. And we need to make sure the rim strip is covering all the spokes. So I'm also going to do a quick glance to make sure the rim strip is covering the spokes. There we go, it is. If you do see a spoke exposed somewhere and it's pointy, poking at the tire, the tube, we will need to cover that up. Sometimes you just have to reposition the rim strip. Other times, we actually have to put a whole new piece of rim strip in there. So rim looks good, the spokes are all covered, and the rim itself is also smooth with no cuts or nicks or sharp bits. Excellent. We are then going to turn to our inner tube, and we're going to pump that up, putting a little air in here to see if we can hear a hole. If you hear the hole, we can then look in the corresponding part of either the tire or the rim. If it's on the inside, look for the rim. If it's on the outside, look to the tire. And if you have two holes on either side, that's called a snake bite or a pinch flat. So again, you sort of put all this information together to why it went flat in the first place. Now that we're all separated, we're going to put our new tube into the tire. First thing we're going to do is you're going to get the correct style of tube. So you will read what size it is, which is read off the side of the tire, and then corresponding to the correct tube. Note the valve style. There is both the skinny Presta valve and the more standard automotive Schrader valve. So figure out what valve style it was. This one was the larger Schrader valve. When you open up your tube, it is going to be completely deflated and very difficult to work with. So a great little trick is to put a little air pressure in the tube to make it round and give it some shape. So you simply take your deflated tube and put just a little bit of air pressure into it. Not a lot of air pressure, just enough to make it round. This will make it much easier to put in. At this stage, put the tube aside, and we need to get the wheel and the tire ready. You're going to pick up your wheel. Because this is a disc brake, the disc is always on the left-hand side. Your tire might have a direction to it. Written on the side of the tire, along with the size, the air pressure, will also have a rotation direction. So this rotation wants the wheel to rotate in this direction. That's fine. And I know my wheel also wants to rotate in this direction because the disc brake is being on the left. I'm going to put half the tire in, and we're going to pinch that on. So using just my hands, get the tire half on the rim. At this point, you should have a big space that now we can stick your partially inflated tube into. I'll take the tube. I will go to the valve first, get the valve started, and now I'm going to tuck the tube into the tire. Tuck the tube into the tire, pushing it in there. We don't want any tube sticking out. Now we're ready to put the other half of the tire onto the rim. This is where we are going to work slowly, starting at the valve, working opposite, pinching with our hands, getting the tire onto the rim. At this point, I want you to try a few different times with your hands. I don't want you to use a tire lever. So many people are tempted at this point to put a tire lever in and pop it on. That is where most people puncture the inner tube in the assembly phase, because that tube can be poking out a little bit, and then they get the tire lever in there. The tire goes on, sure enough, but you actually puncture the inner tube. So my trick is to try with your hands first, and always give it 3 good hard tries with your hands before you go to the tire lever. Once you get to the final 6 inches or so of tire, this is where we are going to use our hands and the palm of our hand, and we're going to roll the tire on. Rolling it on to the rim. There we go. Now we just have to inflate and monitor it to make sure we did this all correctly. Before I put the pump on, I will throw my lock ring back on. You don't want to go too tight here. You just want to put it on enough so that the valve remains steady. We will then put some air into the tire, and we're going to put air into the tire in stages. At first, pump it up so that the tire gets seated onto the rim. So starts pressing against the rim. It has some shape to it. And we're going to inspect all along the tire rim interface around the bead here to make sure everything looks good. At this point, if you see tube poking out, stop, deflate the tube and start again. If you see the tube actively growing, put it down, walk away. There's a good chance it's going to explode. So that's why we always put just a little bit of air in and then inspect both sides. Everything looks good here, no tube coming out. Now I'm going to continue inflating to my desired pressure. This being a mountain bike tire, I am going to go to 30 PSI. There we go. Take my pump off. One final inspection all the way around. Make sure the bead is uniform. You'll see a little line on the tire. You want to make sure that looks uniform all the way around. You can also give it a spin and watch down the tire. Make sure it's not tipping over to the side, sucking up and down in a spot. Make sure it looks nice and uniform, which this one does. Lightly bring the lock ring to the valve, just enough so the valve doesn't wiggle. Put your valve cap on, and you're ready to reinstall the wheel.